G'day, you're listening to Conrad Albertyn. I am a South African here in, obviously, South Africa, but I'm here to talk about, in many senses, what Ubuntu is and how South Africa is going to get through its problems in many ways, at least from my own perspective. Please note that this is obviously very sort of personal in respect to that kind of opinion, but one of the things we sort of have to start with is that South Africa's gone through many years of problems that may sometimes be considered to be unexpected, sometimes issues that we as people are subject to and subject people to. This idea that for the last couple of centuries the country and the people are at loggerheads. It feels as though as things move on, we're beginning to understand how cultures move together because we know how or why these things are happening. We can do better as people. But that idea that we want to be able to feel what we would consider to be love, partnership, camaraderie, is becoming more difficult at times to find that sort of common goal. Everyone wants to be able to move forward, but things happen beyond politics. This perspective is that we're losing our way, that obviously, it's a human problem. We're always looking out for ourselves more than we are looking towards the people next to us. South Africa, in many ways, has this way of trying to almost do better than that. We call that term Ubuntu, which is a meaning of community, finding one another when there are problems or issues. But this idea of togetherness has to be able to fix that problem. So, while we're speaking about this now, especially in this country, it almost seems like Ubuntu is a pipe dream. There's no way that we can find that kind of togetherness that is either A, worthwhile, or B, workable. And we can look at, other very great minds within the country, people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who says the following, where a person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming to others and of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, based from this proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished, when others are tortured or oppressed. Nelson Mandela also explains that Ubuntu is much like a traveler through a country would stop at a villager or a village, and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food and attend to him. That is only one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various other aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not address themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? And so that's pretty much what Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Tutu have to say about it. Now, if you're ever walking around in the streets, you'll find that when you greet someone, they'll greet back. If you continue to do that day to day, you'll realize that humanity that we have as South Africans, that we share with one another, when things are going bad, people understand what bad is. They're on different levels, of course, but to understand that, however, it starts with the idea of saying hello. Beyond just normal, how are you, I'm fine, how are you, we're beginning to lose the meaning of what asking how are you means. We're finding it difficult to remember what it's like to say I'm okay. We're struggling. We struggle across more than just money or society or politics. We're struggling to find an identity that we can agree on. This is a fight that, as a people, we need to ask that particular question. Who am I? And what can I do? This is, of course, something that's very important. And that starts with the question of how are you? So society in South Africa needs to be able to recognize the people around it, needs to understand that individuals struggle, and those individual struggles are just that, but that they also feed into the struggle of everyone's everyday life. Racism is, of course, a very important problem. It's something that we need to be able to address, not just perpetuated from one side or the other towards either side. It's a melting pot of anger that no longer simmers due to the constraints of the old regime under apartheid, and a brand new hatred brought in by political agendas It's one of genuine human anger. We're frustrated and we're squabbling amongst one another for this idea of politicking, or this just for some sort of political system. Our leaders are not fighting for the best interest of our people. At least many of us would feel that. These political fights are internal, trying desperately to put systems into place that can tag themselves as the savior of South Africa. All this while, in essence, not listening to the people who need to be listened to. These people, the citizens of South Africa, are out there day in and day out struggling to make that living. I mean, if I may interject with some personal anecdotes, as I've hit my 30s, I'm beginning to realize that there are no reasons for me to leave. That my home is here, that irrespective of my race, irrespective of my identity, I want to make this country a place everyone can be proud to live in. But my pride in my country isn't placed in sort of Afrikaner pride or English pride or settler pride. It's something that I wouldn't know what to call it. I feel sort of middle of the road here, unable to stand with any of the parties out there. And that becomes very, very difficult at times to sort of address. It becomes something that, again, comes to that idea of what identity is and how we're supposed to identify as, a people. And at the end of the day, like, I'd like to sort of consider this idea that maybe hope is all I'm hoping, or maybe we're hoping to be. Ubuntu, in many senses, brings that hope. And I think we've lost it somewhere. And we've replaced it with greed. And we do very desperately need to be better.